Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Trackmania episode 8, brought to you by ESAC. Of course, once again, we are back. As only two faces you will be seeing now. I'm your host, Paul Scotty Gillies, and joining me for now, of course, for the duration of this episode, we will have Turbo joining us. Eirik is currently a little bit busy at the moment, however, he will be joining us momentarily, so just wait for the customary hello and then we will know our Norwegian has decided to finally join us. But we are here, and for episode 8 we've got a multitude of things to discuss. Of course, we are just fresh off the Zerator Cup, which finished that weekend just there. We've had some other tournaments going on, such as Pittsburgh Knights we've got to talk about. But to start us off with, the most important question of every week is, how is the beautiful man joining me on the broadcast today?
Yeah, Paul, I'm good. Thanks a lot. And welcome also from my side. How are you doing, man? I just had to giggle a bit about the Cuba Libre photo there, or about the photo. But yeah, I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. I mean, a little bit of a giggle there myself. I mean, impressive for Eirik. We know he's had his troubles before, shall we say. But yeah, as I said, he'll be with us in a few minutes. Not to worry, guys, as long as he gets his Discord up and going. But while Eirik is not here, I figured we'd have a little bit of a kind of mini topic for us to discuss to get everyone's appetite whetted for the duration of the podcast for today. And that would be to start us off with one of the new things that's kind of came into the game, which hasn't really been discussed as much. However, we have all experienced it. We all know about it, and that is the addition of ice. But I believe he has joined us. But I'll just kick off what I was going to mention there, just for while he's getting himself set up there. He has returned. But just a quick kind of summary of ice. Of course, there's a new surface that was brought into the game, and it was quite a little bit of a shake-up from what we're used to from different surfaces that have been in the game before. I mean, what can you tell us about your experience, Turbo, when you first found out about ice, when you first drove it? What was your kind of first impressions and how you've kind of learned from there, so to speak?
I mean, my impression beforehand actually was that it behaves like no grip a bit, but that was the complete opposite. And I mean, I had this training map going on where you had like this long ass 180-degree turn, and then this tight 180-degree turn. And this map was actually kind of hard for me, but eventually I got used to that. But now if I play Summer 03, for example, I don't really know how to do that. So bobsleigh is still a mystery for me. And it is all about holding your gear and everything. And it is super hard. And it's definitely something that will take a lot of time to get used to that. But on the other hand, like the normal ice, I think it's better. But also, I think the track of the day yesterday was very hard for me, because you really want to exit very, very well on ice. And you also want to get your car around. So you want to stay 90-degree, but you have to countersteer, but not countersteer too much, or be in 90-degree. It's so hard for me, actually. It is super difficult, really handling my car on ice. What do you think about ice?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a big shake-up for me. I mean, I'm used to all the kind of different surfaces that we've had in the games before, and it wasn't really something I could draw a parallel to. I mean, you were talking there no grip, but I think we realised how different it was quite quickly when we got all of our wheels on track for that, so to speak. But it's a nice change. My only concern is how it starts to get used. You know, I mean, I at least remember from Tech when there was a bunch of new blocks that came in through like a title pack or something like that. They were spammed. Everyone was using them everywhere, even in places where it didn't really work. And I feel like for especially the direction the game's going into, a more multi-style, I think that ice isn't really the best style to be kind of bringing into the game straight away. I think we've got a lot of other kind of areas of the game that we should be focusing on, but I think it's a nice addition. I think it can open up new ways to play the game, you know, some avenues we've not yet explored. But just as a kind of minor topic there, we don't want to drag on about that a bit too much. We'll go a bit in depth in that in some later episodes. But I understand Eirik appears to be good to go here, or is he still broken?
So yeah,
how's it going?
Never.
I would just want to add one more thing. It seems for me that ice is definitely one of the environments or the styles that favors full speed players the most, as it seems. That it's really, really about holding your momentum and getting speed. And thus you could have seen on all the tracks that are related to ice, the gaps between like local 1 and local 10 are tremendous. So that's the last thing I want to add. Let's go into that topic maybe next, or like in 2 or 3 episodes when everything is a little bit more aged. And Eirik, how are you feeling, man?
Yeah, I'm good. Just finished an interview. Of course, had some Discord problems, but this time it was like Discord wouldn't even start. I was like, oh no, here we go again. But in the end, I managed to push through an interview, so it's going to be on Trackmania Live tomorrow, even though that interview is not going to be live. But now I'm here with you guys again. So all problems in the past are forgotten. The Sunday when I spoke with Turbo is forgotten, but now I'm ready to speak about Trackmania. But I cannot mention a lot about ice because, like I say, I'm not a Trackmania player. I'm just a casual fan, I guess.
I would have thought you had the home advantage with the ice. I mean, being a Norwegian, you would...
You have seen me on ice, dude. You have seen
having ice.
This shoulder is the victim of ice.
Having ice in your Cuba Libre is also like a very important factor, man.
It's too early to mention Cuba Libre, even though it's Tuesday, right?
It's over 2020. Hello.
Yeah. Exactly. But before we get a bit too sidetracked, this will turn into a completely different podcast if we let that happen. Of course, nice to finally have you with us. And we were just going through while you were away there the topics we're going to be talking about today. We've, of course, had the Zerator Cup that's been going about through the last 2 weekends, at the very least, with the finals concluding. And the weekend just there, we've had a new winner. We've had the full playoffs going their way. And we, of course, had some records being broken, some new trends being set by Zerator, I suppose, with some pretty big numbers. But Eirik, I mean, you were doing a lot of coverage for that weekend in general. How was your kind of impression of how it went? If you could kind of encapsulate that kind of weekend feeling into one thing, so to speak.
Well, I think I have a pretty good overview of the sort of, what to say, storylines, but I don't think I have the best. If you go into, let's say, why Gwen beat Carl Jr., I don't think I can be the technical guy there. But the major storyline for me was that in the qualifications, I think people expected maybe Zerator to do higher numbers. His peak at the qualifications, if I recall correctly, was 86,000 viewers. That was lower than in 2019. And I think people expected him to have higher numbers then, simply because it's a new game, so it will be naturally more hyped. But then people forget maybe that during the qualifications, he allowed Domingo, Kameto, Solari to stream. And now it was only Zerator. And now you saw what sort of power in the terms of numbers he can bring into the game. I mean, me and Turbo predicted this on the preview. I think Turbo said 80K. And I was like, I'm going to be ballsy. I'm going to say 130K. And I was even too short. It was 140,000 viewers watching this game. That is the single highest peak this game has had in the history of the game. And it was an online edition of the Zerator Trackmania Cup. So it's not you have this major hype simply because people want to see how is Gwen going to look in front of 15,000 people? How is Carl Jr. going to look? You didn't see the players. You only saw them driving and you saw Zerator. Or sometimes you didn't even see the player driving in the first semifinal. But you get the point. I think the viewers are higher than expected simply because compared to the qualifications, they are enormous. And last year it was sort of equal in just the viewing numbers. So that is the biggest takeaway. And I think besides Gwen beating Carl Jr., I think that is going to be the major thing to be remember if you look back at this cup in 3 years, that damn, he actually broke 100,000 viewers. And not only that, he went 40,000 viewers past that. So simply insane what Zerator is able to do and the numbers he's able to pull every year.
For sure. I mean, it's certainly been almost a snowball for him since he's especially started in the last few years, especially in these numbers you can translate to Trackmania. I mean, of course, I'm not a follower of Zerator myself. Of course, he's a French streamer. So, of course, our French community out there will be able to educate us more on how his kind of base is progressing, so to speak. But you can see it when it's translating into massive increases in numbers for the events he does host, things like the Zerator Cup, things like the ZLAN, and even his involvement in the tournaments. I believe it was Catalan last year, again received a significant amount more interest as a result of him participating in the tournament itself. But Turbo, of course, you were also part of the preview show with Eirik on the Sunday, being part of the kind of hype squad going into
Part
this.
of it, you basically carried it for 1 hour when I was sleeping.
Yeah, although I didn't hear anything about that, so I suppose maybe you guys will need to tell me a bit more about what went wrong there. But in terms of
what went wrong.
Well, I suppose if it's got you involved, I've maybe got a few ideas. But I mean, you were kind of invested in this event. I'd like to say, of course, both in a player capacity in past and also through this edition. I mean, how were you kind of following the event, and what was your feeling coming into it and coming out of it?
So, I mean, for the qualification, I was like a bit, surprised that other people than Zerator could actually cast the quarterfinal. By the name of Domingo, of course, who covered Bad Lulu's match. But on the other hand, I think it really created some awesome moments. We had this top 1 moment where Domingo just put Bad Lulu just on his shoulders and just celebrated with him. So this was a very, very cool situation. And I think I didn't really go with too many expectations into the semifinal. I mean, I hyped it up, and just when I wanted to end, I was like, oh man, we have a semifinal coming up, and then also a very spicy semifinal, which was very good, the first one. The second one was a bit more clearer, and then the final, of course, was good, the battle between Carl Jr. and Gwen. But I really enjoyed this tournament, but my expectations were not really that high since the last year that was just insanely good, where I was really attending this event. So I think an offline event could have made this one better. But I mean, speaking to the online numbers, this is just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, if we kind of take the numbers out of the picture, of course, that is quite a storyline going into this, is how popular the event was, how much viewership it gained, how much kind of publicity and attention it generated overall. Eirik, in terms of the event itself, if we take the numbers out of the equation, how would you kind of gauge how successful the event went overall in terms of, the results, the kind of engagement from the community itself, how they felt about the event, if they were hyped up for it, if they feel good about it afterwards? What's the kind of feeling on ground level for that, would you say?
Yeah, I just want to mention, if you take away sort of the numbers, I think maybe you take away sort of the major reason why I think the international people like this game or like this event. But I think this event, in a weird way, helped the hype for the next event. Because now you're going to head into Bercy and Holdal Arena with Carl Jr. is not longer the winner of this cup. He's then going to have it's sort of like you can compare it to when Zerator first went offline. The first offline edition, people were like, okay, Carl Jr. has won it 2 times in a row. Now he's going to be crowned as a new champion in front of the people in Paris. Then Javier Flyer beat him. Then the question in 2017 was like, is Carl Jr. going to come back? Was he maybe only good online in this cup? And then eventually he won it in 2017, 2018, 2019. Now it's a new game. Now our Carl Jr. is still the best. So you no longer have this maybe set in stone feeling about, okay, Carl Jr. is going to just come away and win it. Now you have the question about, is Gwen maybe the new king of Trackmania? Is Gwen maybe the new, or maybe not the new king of Trackmania, maybe the new king of this particular event that Carl Jr. has dominated for so long? And I think we need rivalry in this game. Or rivalry is maybe the wrong word, but you get what I mean, like a friendly rivalry. It's not like they're going to trash talk each other, and if they do, I'm not going to understand it, so I'm going to be sad about that. But, like, just having this talking point into next year's edition about, is Carl going to beat him? Is Gwen going to take it away and win again? Is maybe Bren finally going to take his solo win? So simply having that talking point going into next edition that is going to be hopefully in Holdal Arena, just going to make that edition even bigger. The people are then going to be, or the players are then going to be more used to the new game. So it's not going to be like, or maybe Gwen won because he's the fastest learner. Maybe he spent more hour in the new game than Carl Jr. So I think this edition helped the hype for the next event. But I also think we should not underestimate how impressive this performance is by Gwen. We have talked about Gwen for a long time. And when people, in a weird way, I know we're going to speak about Gwen later, but in a weird way, when some people say that they are impressed by, okay, Gwen is 15 years old, he won this. And then you have the other side of the community or other side of the chat saying like, Yeah, of course. He just played since he was 4 years old, so it's not that impressive. Come on, he's fucking 15 years old. When I was 15 years old, I didn't know Trackmania, basically. I didn't know what to do in life. And this guy won in front of 140,000 viewers. So I think Gwen's win helped this game. And I think it's maybe healthy that Carl Jr. gets a rival, because maybe now he's also going to be more motivated. Maybe now he's also going to push the limit. So simply the storylines and the things that I like to follow is who is the best players. I'm happy. I'm happy that actually Gwen won it, simply because then you have this friendly rivalry.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you were saying about the storylines there. I mean, it's something I'd kind of equate to the problem kind of Formula One goes through. I mean, I don't know how much you guys follow that, but a lot of the kind of a little bit of distaste towards Formula One at the moment is that it's dominated by so few faces. You know, when you're going into a race, you know either one of a very select few people is going to win it. It's not like you can go into a tournament with, say, 16 people in Trackmania and any one of them could win it. You go into a tournament in Trackmania and say it's a tech tournament. You've got a choice of 4 people pretty much who could win that. Zerator Cup before, it's felt like you've went into a tournament like that and you've got a choice of maybe, 4 people who could win it again. I mean, even with some of the kind of surprises that the Zerator Cup throws at you, I mean, due to the nature of it kind of being a bit of a volatile style, shall we say. But I mean, not just in terms of Gwen now bringing up a kind of argument into him, well, of course, a very strong argument with him actually having won the event, but bring himself into that discussion, bring himself into the, who would win next Zerator Cup. He's now part of that discussion in anyone's lips because he's a winner now, of course. But you've also got some other players which were at least a positive surprise to me, namely Zera in the first semi-final did perform very well, especially at the start. Kind of faded a little bit in one of the maps, but nearly got through to the finals himself. I mean, of course, some people know about him through his previous participation in cups like that. But I mean, coming off of things like the semi-finals and the finals turbo, is there any kind of storylines or any points of the event that really are going to stick with you a little bit here, or that you're gonna that you focused on when you were watching it?
I mean, I said that Sarah will go to the final, and what really makes me sad that the pressure got to him, you can really see it, because he choked a lot of rounds. But like a storyline, maybe that Yannick has qualified to the semifinal despite his training. And other than that, I mean, the final was, it was exciting, but you could really see the dominance of Carl Jr. and Gwen there, to be honest. They played outstandingly well. I mean, Aurel was coming back on this last map where Gwen won it. But other than that, not really a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, like, looking at the final itself, I mean, unfortunately, I didn't get to watch the full final, and of course, the VODs are normally locked behind subscribers, but I managed to catch the start of it, and I managed to catch the end of it. I remember going through the start of it, and it was one of these ones where I'm thinking, right, okay, I know that it's just going to be 2 people who are contesting for this here, and if I remember right, when I left, that Carl Jr. was in the lead, and he was looking good, and I came back, and he's like 20 points behind. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here, And then, I managed to tune in just at the end, and then it's suddenly close again. It was quite a back and forth final, and I'm glad of that. I mean, although you have performances coming out from players like, say, back in from Zero to Hero tournaments, or Gwen going through his quarterfinals and such, but it has just been dominations. It's nice to see back and forth and things like that, and a match you can really get invested into, instead of it just being kind of a one-way show, so to speak. But, I mean, looking at the tournament overall, I mean, you were kind of saying this as it being hyped up a lot for the next event, so to speak, with it, of course, returning to LAN event and things like that. Is there any kind of other storylines you're looking for the next event? I mean, talking about viewership increasing and things like that. I mean, we've also seen a number of new faces coming through the qualifier stages and things like that, some just missing out. People like Zera getting very close, Yannick and such getting involved. I mean, what are you guys kind of looking at for the next event? I mean, is this going to be the kind of be-all and end-all of the kind of the Zerator arc, so to speak? Is this where it's going to climax? Is that what you guys are kind of looking at for the next event?
I can go first.
Yeah, go for it.
Simply, if you just stick on these sort of player storylines, or just talk about the players and not maybe in terms of how popular this event is going to be, I think something we maybe forget to mention once we recap the whole event overall is that where were all the international players? I mean, this event simply felt like a French event more than an international event, simply because the French players took it more serious. And I'm talking about Carl Jr. like he's French because he speaks French, and I mean, I think France adopted him in some way, and now they are adopting Yannick's. But I'm wondering if now the international players are maybe slacking a little bit once it comes to how serious they take it. Maybe now they don't see him maybe as a good reason to take this serious the whole year. Now maybe they have Champion Granley that they want to focus more on, maybe get more into the endurance format. While you have people like Bad Lulu, who, how many other events does he play each year? I think he more or less, you can call him sort of a NRT specialist. And I guess the same is sort of for, in some way, for Default, Serrar, Glass, now Darker maybe. So they are just continue to evolving in being a specialist as this event. So at some point, this event is just going to be more and more dominated by French people. This year was by far the biggest in terms of how many people qualified for semifinal, by 6. So that is a storyline I want to look into, if the international players just took it not seriously enough this year, or if they are not simply not good enough on this style anymore, because we have now specialists that want to qualify to a Core Hotels arena. So that is something I'm going to have in the back of my mind once we get into next year, and probably April once the qualification is going to take place.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of that kind of argument for international players and things like that, I mean, that's something that's kind of been, that I've been looking a lot at for these sort of, for this edition in particular. It just seems to be that, I mean, in terms of this, if we kind of separate it into 2 groups, your international players and, of course, your French-speaking players, of course, that takes in people like Yannick, that takes in a lot of your Belgian players, that takes in Canadian players, or French-Canadian players, will specify. It seems to be that it's a completely different result you can get out of the tournament. There's a completely different reward you can get from this tournament if you're a French player and if you're an international player. I don't recall if we discussed this at all, but of course, I mean, we can go over it. That's not a problem. That's what we're here for. Of course, we're here to talk Trackmania. But I mean, you looked at this way, right? So one of the examples I would give would be Revolution, right? Revolution has shown himself to be very, very capable on Zerator style maps. He's been to 2 grand finals, if I recall correctly, a solo edition and a team edition with Matt. And he's been to 2 grand finals. And in terms of exposure and publicity, although he has not capitalised on that, I mean, he only recently created Twitter, he doesn't stream or anything like that. What he would then get from that is nowhere near in comparison to what a player like Bad Lulu would get from it, to what a player like Gwen would get from it, because they can capitalise upon because all of the hype, well, not all of the hype, but a significant amount of the hype, a significant amount of the interest, and this is coming from France. It's coming from French-speaking people. It's coming from, French organisations, the likes of your Domingo and things like that. I mean, that it's the way I looked at it, especially with it not being a LAN final this time. I think some players who were international are looking at this thinking, right, what do I get out of playing this tournament? Because Zerator's been very open about his tournaments. They're not for the players. They're for the fans. You know, he's spoken about that before. I think it's just, if the player doesn't have the incentive in front of having that unique experience, playing in front of thousands and thousands of people, then they're looking at it more as either just a pure competition, or they're looking at it as a payday, and that only appeals to a certain amount of people. There's no secret that it's a very, very well-hunted tournament because, as I said, French people are very well incentivized to play this event, to hunt this event. I mean, we've seen this event make streaming careers for these people, We've seen so many new Twitch partners being made because of the interest from Zerator Cup. We've seen community personalities rise through the Zerator Cup, new names being made in France, of course, from this. I just think there's not as much incentive for international players to be going for it, and you see that by not as many of them participating, and the ones that did just not caring as much, as there's just not as much they get from it. But you were one of the international players who did at least get involved in the cup and has historically been involved in the cup. So, I mean, I'm assuming you've kind of spoke to other players about it. I mean, would you have any more of an insight on that at all, Turbo?
So I would say that it's actually the prestige to go on stage for the most of the people who really played there. And I mean, when the English players did discover the game, the French people just try hard at the game. And I think it's also the lack of practice that the English players have gotten. And you've already mentioned it. It's like there's a French streamer. This game is more hyped in France. And in general, there's a huge French community, not only behind Zerator, but behind whole Trackmania community. And you could have seen it, 5,700 people signing up for this tournament. And I think over 4,000 players have participated in this one. And it's so much for the players actually to get a chance into streaming and to everything. And you can see Darker and also Bad Lulu getting the raid from Zerator afterwards. I doubt that Zerator would have raided a person afterwards if he was not French. I'm claiming that, but maybe some French people saying, yo, this guy is English. Why should I like follow him or so? Maybe the minority of the people. But I mean, there is much more on stake for the French people in this edition than like on an offline edition or something like that. Because the main reason most people really practice for this competition is because you get on stage, you have the feeling to stay to play in front of a crowd and everything. And I mean, when I talked to the other players, they said to me that they practice a bit, but like only maybe 1 week before that. I mean, myself, I've practiced 15 to 20 hours for 14 maps, which is like basically nothing. So like discovering the maps, and all the French people just seem to be very sick and very no-lived because they want to give it a shot.
Yeah. I mean, Eirik, coming into the next event, as you've said, you see it as a kind of storyline that's kind of emerged out of this event. Is that something you imagine changing coming through the next year? I mean, I can understand the international community's lack of involvement in this one, and there's always kind of been the argument of the international community feeling a bit alienated by the Zerator Cup from, lack of English streams and things like that. Is this something you imagine changing for the next edition?
By changing, you mean having English cast, or
No,
by how the people are going to be motivated?
If you would imagine the international players getting more involved in the next edition. That's what I meant, sorry.
Yeah, probably. But of course, or not probably, but of course, because it's going to be the biggest stage Trackmania has ever had in front of 15,000 people. And like Turbo is mentioning that pretty much every player you speak with, I think they are almost more happy that they qualified to, let's say, Strasbourg or to Lyon or anything where the cup has been, simply because it's a bigger step to go from the quarterfinal to the semifinal, because in the quarterfinal you sit in your own room, but in the semifinal you play in front of a stage. While if you win it, you're still on the stage, you just won it. But if the mentality is that players didn't play this year because now you missed something, then you're looking for maybe excuses to not take it as serious. I respect a lot of players simply because they went from tech to Trackmania Grand League simply because they are competitors. They just want to be the best at the best. And now you know that the French players are going to take it full serious. You know that Carl Jr. is going to take it serious. You know that you have an up-and-coming player like Gwen. You have one of the best players in Bren taking it serious. So if you want to prove that you are the best player in this game, Zerator Cup is one of the 2 opportunities you have that you know that, okay, the other players are actually going to be trained. You're not going to sit back with an excuse of saying that, oh, Gwen just won because he played more. I see some people using that argument. That to me is bullshit. He won because he's the best player, not because he played the most hours. And if you are a top player that wants to be the best player, why not play this event that comes out? Zerator Cup is once a year, so I don't understand players that don't take it serious. Maybe it was because of the new game being so close to the event itself. I saw some spam mentioning that he want to discover the game and not only go full no life. But I think they are going to be going full ham once we come to Bercy. But I missed them this year and somewhat don't really understand it, but at the same breath understand them, if that makes sense.
that sounds a little bit confusing, but that's okay. I mean, as long as
my head, I'm confused by myself sometimes.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, we know. It's just, yeah, the less said about that, the better, shall we say? But yeah, I mean, I certainly I see your point in terms of being competitive and things like that. I mean, me as a player personally, I feel I kind of separate the Zerator Cup from a lot of the other kind of tournaments that happen throughout the year. I mean, that's just my kind of output on it. I mean, if the Zerator Cup was taken as seriously as most of the other tournaments which you see nowadays, they'd be calling that the World Championship by now. With the amount of with the stage it has, with the kind of exposure. We are back. Some short technical difficulties. There's no time for a toilet break, Deluxe. Don't you even think about it. There's no time for us, so there's no time for you. But fortunately, I didn't lose my train of thought in terms of that. And as I said, that I just did. But what I believe the point I was looking to go on to there was, of course, I mean, in terms of the Zerator Cup and the competitors, that's what I was going to talk about. So in terms of the Cup itself, I feel like a lot of the kind of attitude from players nowadays is they'll either go for a cup they care about personally, as in if they've got some sort of involvement in it, if their friends are playing it, if they enjoy playing the cup itself, that'll severely affect their motivation to participate in it. And if there's a kind of unique factor, like some, the stage effect, so to speak, of the Zerator offline events. But also the other side of things, I believe it is nowadays, is money. It seems to be that a lot of players, it decides who participates in what events. I mean, another example which we'll discuss a little bit later on is the Pittsburgh Knights All-Round Cup. I mean, that has a prize pool, but not a massive one in comparison to some other tournaments. And I believe that's why you're not seeing your top level of competitor there. As far as I know, there's one player out of Trackmania Grand League who's even bothering with it, and that's Spam, if I remember correctly. You're seeing a lot of the players who then don't go for an event like this, and I feel it's just because either it's not interesting them, so they're not that invested in it, or there's not enough of a benefit for them to even get a monetary benefit for them to feel like it's worth their time. The first step, just for those who were not there, was not Pac. Pac didn't participate in the first step. It was Onyo who won the first step. But in terms of that, I mean, I think that really affects a lot of why these sort of players kind of get involved in events like this. But I mean, that's me just kind of looking at it from the outside. I mean, I'm not one of these players that's picking and choosing what I want to play in because I get paid for it. I think my esports earning page says I've got like $30 in prize money or something like that. But I mean, Turbo, do you think I'm kind of blowing off, just letting the shit flow out of my mouth here, or do you think there's some sort of other reason why these top level players are maybe not getting involved in something like the Zerator Cup or just other sort of cups like this in general?
I mean, I have a theory. Because
Here
I
we
mean
go.
the French really try-harded a lot in this competition, and I mean maybe some of the people who like discovered the maps 1 week later felt demotivated, and maybe it's not worth their time because they know that there's a player like Gwen or Carl Jr. who are in a top level, and maybe they cannot like have a chance on their level on Zerator maps, or maybe they didn't like the maps because the maps. I think that the maps were not that easy, and also with the amount of maps that we had, it was really hard to play that. And a thing that I would also change is that there was no English coverage. I mean, of course, the Zerator things, yeah, I want to have all of the cake, but I think that a reward would be for an English person, or like for an English speaking streamer or whatever, to have like an English stream to like watch it and not watch the Zerator cast. So I think that people got demotivated by the amount how much the French people played, and we can also see that. I mean, in the quarterfinal, we had 2 non-French speaking players. We had Revolution and we had Spam, and that's it. And I mean, before that, it was a different call, but I mean, you can't take that serious. I mean, Spam has almost made it, but yeah, I think it's the fact that we had the game to be discovered and other things were like maybe a little bit more important. I mean, we have seen Riolu last year also not participating and maybe just taking the tournament like a little bit more casually as some other players as well, like myself or so what.
Mm-hmm. For sure, yeah.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Are we talking about the English cast? If he should have, okay. I think I have a view that maybe the international community disagree with, and sort of being the community person of the year, I think people expect me to sort of vouch for an English cast. I totally understand Zerator not having an English cast. He wants this to be a show, not a esport event. Maybe if he put this in the hand of, let's say, Riolo, I think is the best caster, or G Geek, who's now becoming maybe the replacement for, or now maybe you or Turbo, we are going to put this as an esport first, not as a show. Then his whole idea that he started 7 years ago is not going to be valid anymore. So I totally understand that he doesn't want to bring the thing he has built up for 7 years into the hands of someone else, and they are going to be misrepresenting what he actually wants this to be. Maybe G Geek is going to be the best to sort of say what the English people should know, because he can simply just translate it instead of making it to his own show. I saw John making in a Discord call that maybe if a big streamer suggests something to his creator, then maybe he's going to see the benefit of the exposure. But at this point, the only benefit he gets is that he's going to shut up the English community by them asking for this. I don't think he's going to necessarily gain anything. I think if you have an English cast, that we should be happy if it's 5K viewers. So, of course, I would like it, because I'm going to be selfish to say that I would love to watch this as an English caster, but I can totally understand Zerator's view that why should I give this into someone else's hands that might misrepresent it, instead of just having full control so I can exactly know what I'm representing to the people that is going to watch it. And if that's French only, then that's the case. But I don't think it's going to change. It's not changed. And it happened one time that the grand final was cast in English. So
yeah, by Spam.
Yeah, exactly. And if that is your talking point every year, that you're going to be demotivated by not having an English cast, then I don't think this cup is for you, because this is a cup by Zerator. This is not an official cup hosted by
Indeed.
Mateo.
I mean, I not said that. I just said that we don't have this English exposure that players maybe want to get, because I think that players, or that the spectators tend to like follow or watch a French streamer more than an English one. And that's why people might not be interested, because they just don't get the fame, quote unquote, as a French winner would get. You know?
Well, I think, yeah, valid point, but I think that's also wrong, because the exposure you get, let's say if the exposure I get, let's say if I interview Zerator, if that was in French, that would be a lot bigger just for me, the saying that, yeah, I did it. If you win in front of 150 or 40,000 viewers, you can put that on your resume to any orgs in this game.
Yeah, of
and
course.
that will look a lot better than saying that, yeah, I won in front of 10,000 viewers, but that was English viewers. I think simply, if you say that, okay, this is a lot of exposure, but it's just for French people, I think you're wrong. I think not you necessarily, but I think people are wrong by saying that it's only a chance to get exposure for French players. We don't know that. I mean, Javi Flyer, if he was like still around, if he wanted to stream, he could have benefited from that. I remember Koons in Cup 2 and 3. I think he had a lot of viewers. He got a lot of followers simply because people like, Zerator brings you up. So Zerator likes to bring up people like Koons. I think he likes to bring up people like Spam. He cares about the players that plays his cup, not just because they speak French. So I think this is maybe a false narrative, simply because the best players at this cup has been French, and then you sort of naturally think that this cup is only good for French players. So that's my point of view. I might be wrong, but I think that is something that is not talked too much about.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly see where you're coming from. I mean, I'm part of the camp that thinks, I mean, well, of course, I agree with what you're saying there. I think it's still for me as that it's more that you get from if you're French compared to if you're English. But I guess that's just the nature of the event having the kind of base it does. But I mean, in terms of the event itself, I mean, we've spent basically 40 minutes talking about just that in its own. I mean, what was one kind of thing I wanted to talk about the event as well? Although we've kind of focused on a lot of the things that the storylines, what we took from the event, we also saw a few problems coming in for the event. Namely, at the start in the semi-finals, we saw a lot of issues with the kind of the spectating and things like that. And I mean, what were your guys' thoughts when you saw the reaction, the chat and the different, like Zerator himself actually remarking upon when we're seeing things like Aurel desyncing massively and crashing into the wall, and who was it? I believe it was Bren as well in semi-final one that was having so many issues. I mean, I was concerned moving into this cup because I've been talking a little bit about how I feel the game really doesn't feel finished. There's a lot of issues and a lot of bugs with the game, and I think this really was the worst possible place for it to happen. It was the worst possible, stage for it to happen when 90,000 people are watching, and then there's a massive spectator bug, which, in my opinion, kind of ruined a bit of the viewer experience for me when you're not really knowing what kind of position people are. And I mean, what were your kind of guys' thoughts? I mean, was it fine for you guys? I mean, how do you think that had a big impact at all in the first semi-final? I mean, I understand both of you were watching it at least.
I mean, in the podcast beforehand, I had the question: will there be any game-breaking bug or something like that, or anything spectator-based or whatever? And I said, no, I don't think that this will happen. And then, like 2 rounds in, and this happens. I think the chat, or like Zerator himself, took it with humor. Some rounds were close, as you could have seen from the CPs, but in the end, I mean, you could have seen like the decisive rounds and everything, but it still killed a bit of the spectator like experience, since there's one player just doing arbitrary things, but somehow still being in a fight. You have to look into the CPs, and yeah, I mean, I think even Nadeo knew from that bug, and they have not fixed it. As I've got that information from my chat today. I don't know if this is true or not, but if so, it would be bad because they have known of it and they have not fixed it.
I think the good thing about this was that Zerator was the guy casting it. He basically said, once I was talking with him in Lyon, I said, "Are you ever getting nervous?" And then I was referring to, "Are you nervous before you get onto a stage?" Because it's going to be a lot of live viewers. You can sort of distance yourself if there is going to be online viewers. But it's like, nah, if something goes wrong, people are going to say, it's just Zerator. And I think that was also the case here. He just laughed about it. He just played around with it. But if that bug had continued on to, let's say, the other semifinal and to the final, then I think it would have been a problem, because then it would sort of put a mark on the whole event. But luckily, maybe it was the first match, so now maybe already people forgot about it, but hopefully now Deo didn't forget about it. And I think he was posted on Twitter that it should be fixed, but I guess we just have to wait until the next event that we can spectate to. But if that is the biggest problem we had in terms of bugs, I'm fine with it. But sure, I want a polished game, but I can survive that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
True.
something I was kind of talking about when it kind of brought onto this subject, because realistically, it's not a very big problem. It lasted for one match. People could still, to some extent, understand what was happening. I mean, your newer viewer might have had a little bit of trouble keeping up. They don't know where to look to find the information that, you know, that we know where to look for in terms of that. I was a little bit concerned on how, you know, it kind of did highlight that the game was still a little bit broken, whereas a lot of people haven't kind of dug that deep and haven't seen some of the bugs that, you know, your more experienced player has kind of been and looked at. But we've saw through the past, I mean, there was a lot of criticism in the deal through, especially the Trackmania 2 lifetime, that not a lot of work was getting done on the game. And people were kind of critical when it came to Zerator Cup last year, when a big kind of wave of, you know, shall we say, content get released, new blocks and things like that to kind of update what was possible for the game for the Zerator Cup and things like that. And we've seen there has been quite a few bugs with the new game. Of course, I mean, as it's been spoken about many times, you know, games nowadays don't get released perfect. That's just the way it is. I mean, I would personally have expected things to be working a little bit better, but I guess that was me being a little bit more hopeful considering Nadio's track record. But, I mean, you look at this isn't really something we'd want to be figuring out or having to be fixed during the biggest stage that the game's ever had. As you were mentioning earlier, Eirik, I mean, 140, 130,000 viewers or whatever it was, that really isn't the kind of platform which you want to be seeing, you know, this sort of thing happening. And as I was speaking to people about it, this bug was known about after day 1, day 2, day 3. You know, as far as I understood, it was even people knew about it in the beta stages and things like that. And to me, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it concerns me when, I mean, I'm glad that it's now going to be fixed as a result of the Zerator Cup highlighting it, but I would prefer it didn't even get to that stage. But I don't know. I mean, it felt like some people were getting the attitude that a lot of work was getting done by Nadio just for the Zerator Cup. Fixes were coming in for the Zerator Cup. Content was going to come in for the Zerator Cup. And I suppose for the next year and the years going forward, I mean, there was kind of hints put out that well, it was going to be this year, of course, but either it was going to wind down with the Zerator Cup in the following years or even stop altogether, and he was going to continue with his own projects by being, of course, with the Accor Hotels Arena. I mean, you can't go much bigger than that, as some people were saying, without going international. It's kind of, I can only hope that we will see a little bit more kind of proactivity going forward than that. But I mean, do you guys have any kind of closing thoughts on Zerator you'd like to address before we kind of talk about another kind of, well, isolate a kind of storyline that came out of that and Gwen?
I think just quickly, I don't think we should take Zerator for granted. I think we should, and I think maybe this is a bigger problem in the Trackmania community, and I think might be a sort of a reason to that problem as well. That instead of mentioning that the good parts about what people bring into the game, we are really good at pointing out the things we dislike about something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, instead of people maybe praising Zerator for once again hosting a big tournament, once again being big exposure, the thing I heard most was maybe like, why didn't he care about English viewers? He cared about the fucking whole Trackmania community when doing this for the community. I made an own video about how it's changed Trackmania. If I could sort of put that more into, let's say, I don't know, subjective, it's our own feeling, right? So I would say saved Trackmania. I think Zerator has saved this game. If it wasn't for Zerator, I don't think I would be personally. I said it after last year's Serati edition that the only reason why I'm basically sticking so much around is because I believe so much in what he can bring into this game with Accor Hotels Arena. Now, of course, there's a new game, and now Accor Hotels Arena is delayed another year. But he's one of the main reasons why I'm still in the game and why I still believe in this game, because he simply brings in so many viewers, so much hype, and it also makes Ubisoft and Deo believe in this game, and that is the biggest maybe thing he's doing, that he makes them believe in that, and then maybe we can pay off for that. So I think people should respect him more and maybe don't be afraid to say it. just say that instead of maybe pointing out some small problems that you have with this cup and sort of making that into a big problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you that a lot of people do take what is kind of brought into them for granted. As I feel it's one of the things that, because it has been and has kind of I say isolation in terms of, you know, the French cast, a lot of French players and things like that. A lot of the people who are kind of outside that bubble that maybe aren't at the level of quality of a player where they can, you know, reap the direct benefits of going to a LAN event and things like that. I think, you know, it does fall victim to focusing on the negatives, because that's all they can see in front of them. You know, they don't look at the long-term effect of all of these other players that have kind of came into the game as a result of this and things like that. But I suppose it's all in perspective and how you rationalise that your kind of viewpoint on this, which I suppose is always going to be down to the individual. I mean, we're here, as I'd like to think, as more level-headed individuals than most, or at least you two might be. I'm certainly not. But I mean, kind of moving on to one of the next subjects, which we were wanting to discuss at this point, was kind of one of the main storylines, of course, coming into this event, which was the 15-year-old prodigy of Gwen. Now, I understand. I mean, I've certainly got a few things I can say about him, but I mean, Eirik, you're being the kind of person. I mean, straight away when we had our bet about Trackmania Grand League, you're telling me that Gwen's going to be in the top 3, and you've been talking a lot about Gwen throughout the past few months, and even I'd say up until up throughout this year, singing his praises, and of course it has reaped his reward. I mean, you can be that guy. I told you so. He's came out on top at Zerator Cup. But, I mean, you were talking a little bit about there, some of the kind of community was downplaying his achievements and things like that. But, I mean, from your time following Gwen as part of your role in the community, can you tell us a little bit more about him and how he's kind of got to this point?
Well, sure, I can do that. And, of course, I'm going to say, I told you so. He's going to be one of the best players in this game, and he's going to do it fast, because for every... It's sort of like, I don't know, a graph that sort of in the start you slow down and then eventually just peak and peak and peak, and then you have to wait until it flats out. But I think the video I uploaded of him playing once he was 4 years old is maybe now doing him some disservice, because people are now going to say, oh, he trained for 4 hours each day. His father put him to play for 4 hours, and that's why he's so good now. If I understand Gwen correctly, he played this game when he was 4 years old, but he was a kid, so he did a lot of other stuff as well. He didn't start playing it like we know playing Trackmania like daily until he was like 11 or 12. But he came into the scene, I think the first time I saw him was at the last GA, and he was knocked out pretty early. But he became on sort of my radar once last qualifiers. He won 7 out of 7 matches in the qualifications with Wingo Bear. And people are saying like that he carried Wingo Bear, and I think that is wrong, but still. Already then he was like, oh, Gwen, he can maybe do it already in Strasbourg. Then he failed in there. Wingo Bear actually qualified and won his finalist mode, and it was Gwen who sort of was the bad part of that duo. He was so heartbroken backstage. Of course, 14 years old, and I guess Trackmania is everything in the world. But since then, he's just improved. Story of 2019 in the end was that Gwen is the winner of pretty much every smaller cup, Swears Cup, F-Ray Cup. Started 2020 with winning French Championship, Open Grand League. But the question was always, is he ready to beat Carl Jr.? Is he ready to beat these players? And I think I brought up this point a lot before, because I have always respected his skill level. I mentioned in your cast or our cast or podcast, I don't know, I'm pretty much all over the place, that he can be up there, and it was I still don't understand why he was not in the Trackmania Grand League Season 1. Of course, maybe that's a rule, but I don't care about that rule. I would just want the best players to play.
Bullshit.
Yeah, but still, already then it was like, we missed something in Trackmania Grand League, and that is Gwen. And then you have some people are going to be fanboys and say, yeah, Gwen is so much better than Carl Jr. already. And then you have the other side that are going to be like defending Carl Jr. and say, oh, Gwen is not top 16. So it's always been, where are Gwen actually placing against the best players? Maybe you got the answer now. If not, what are you waiting for? Are you waiting just for the Trackmania Grand League to base your result about how good Gwen is? Gwen is a world-class player now. Gwen has won a major event. Not many players have won a major event in Trackmania. I mean, Carl Jr., you beat Carl Jr. at Zerator. You have done something that I think the history books are going to prove that you did something amazing. So I'm curious to see where progress from this. If he's going to continue progressing like he's done in the last 12 months, I think we can end up sort of in the same scenario where Gwen is Carl Jr., where you head into an event and it's not longer a rivalry between two players. It might be a rivalry between Gwen and the others, all depending on, of course, how he's going to perform at other events. I might draw too fast lines here, but it's time to not underestimate Gwen anymore, and it's time to put some respect to his name and not trying to find a way to discredit his performance by saying that he played more than the others. He has played since he was 4 years old. He's 15, so he can play every day. He's just fucking good at this game. Give the man or boy, I guess. Give the boys some respect. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I believe it is absolutely. I mean, he doesn't get the respect he deserves from his performances. But I mean, you, Turbo, you've especially been casting a lot of these kind of smaller events, especially in 2019 and such. What did you kind of observe from? I suppose 2019 was his real breakout year.
I mean, the thing that I really got from it is like the thing that Gwen played very inconsistent at like in the mid part of 2019. Sometimes, or someone he said in the chat, I don't know how to save. So he's just fast, and sometimes he risks too much. I don't know. There was a tournament like in the midst of 2019, but it seems that he really, really improved at this point. And I really want to stress that one out because he just like turned to a world-class player. So I want to like make a little bit of a throwback and say when I actually like have heard of Gwen for the first time, and it was actually the Zerator Cup before all those smaller competitions beforehand. I mean, he played there, but I didn't really like consider him as a world-class player. And then in the round of 8, dude, this guy, he was a beast. He won like 4 rounds in a row. And he just improved over the days. And I just don't understand why people underestimate him so much, actually, because he has proven himself now. And we've also mentioned that on the podcast as one, if not even the best player in the world. So this could be the turning point of Carl Jr. like has to step down because he lost for one of the first times on the Zerator Cup.
Mm-hmm. I mean, looking at it as to his kind of rise through, I think it's kind of been a little bit unique in the sense that he's been one of the first elite level players in the current style. So we'll say the multi-style, so your Trackmania Grand League and things like that. One of the kind of first players who's really came from, I'll not say that he's came into the game from the Zerator hype, as of course we've seen he's been playing the game, since he was 4 years old and so on. But I would say that he's not came through the traditional way which we've seen a lot of the top players coming out of. It's not been a tech background, likes of your Kappa, Tween, Massa, Carl Jr., etc., etc. It's not been through, people who have honed their skills hunting Nadeos and doing, maybe through TMNF and United, such as Riolu or something like that. They would equate now. It's a completely different journey that he's been through, and he's not competed at these kind of tournaments which typically people would measure the best in the world at, which would have been your Trackmania Grand League now, of course, but talking in the past, you're talking your World Championships, Trackmania Pro League back in the days. Online tech tournaments were even, what some people were using as a kind of back before, they kind of died out a little bit. But that I feel it's been such a unique journey and it's been a bit of a strange one where people don't really know where to place him. And I think that's the same with quite another few players like Default, players like Glass, players like Darker, and things like that, where people just don't know where to place them, and they've not got the traditional metrics, so to speak, as in there's not this tournament that other people have won that he's also won. You've kind of got the Zerator Cup as your one kind of consistent factor there, which you can kind of use as a parallel. And of course, we've seen players who are amazing at Zerator Cups, and that doesn't translate to being an elite level player in the rest of the game. So I think it's a kind of unique journey he's went through in at least recent years in Trackmania. Of course, before kind of 2016-17, I don't really know what he was kind of doing. The first time I remember seeing him was, I believe it was one of the early ANC Cups. when he was part of one of the kind of teams I equated with, like, you had a kind of rush in 2016-17 of these teams that would come out and play like ZRT matches against each other. And I remember him being as part of that kind of scene, so to speak. And I remember him very early from the kind of those kind of scenes and those kind of teams and things like that. Although the one thing I will say about last year's GA, he did actually get kind of far, and he did go through me on his way too, wherever he did end up going. I mean, I remember.
That went far if you go through.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Looked around 3 or what?
No, it was a winner bracket round 2 or 3, if I remember correctly, and he was against me, Symbios, Onyo, and he ended up getting second in that and putting both me and Onyo out. I mean, you can brush me off. That's no problem. You know, that's absolutely fine. But Onyo is no joke. You know, Onyo, a lot of people would say is an elite level kind of tech player, of course. But, I mean, in terms of Gwen as a whole, I think a lot of people do kind of look for excuses in terms of, you know, he's only good because of this. But, I mean, there is a few kind of things you need to look at when you're looking at a player who is at this kind of elite level and is at this kind of age. And one of the kind of comparisons I'd like to draw to this, and one of the kind of questions I'd put to you guys, is Javi Flyer. Now, we saw Javi Flyer kind of, I would say, reaching his peak around about the time where he was, you know, winning the Zerator Cup. He was performing extremely great in online tournaments as well. He was getting in that kind of argument to defeat the likes of Carl Jr., who was the kind of end boss of Trackmania at that time. Now, of course, shortly following Javi Flyer then winning the event, the future took a turn for him. He ended up going into the army. I believe he's pursuing some sort of career path in law in the army now throughout his years. And it's one of the kind of things which I would then kind of like to bring as a question into Gwen's case. Now, Gwen he doesn't have a career yet. He's 15 years old. You know, I'd assume he's still in your kind of, as I would call it, secondary school now. You know, I'd assume he doesn't have a job. You know, he's still going through his normal school, not yet dedicated to a specific kind of study, like through a college or university. How do you guys imagine the kind of trajectory of Gwen going forward now? I think, at the very least, he's still got a few years of not having to worry about, you know, going to university and having to dedicate so much of his time to studying, or having to worry about, say, traveling for job opportunities and things like that. So I imagine it's at least going to remain unimpacted for 1 or 2 years. But we saw that got in the way of Javi Flyer's kind of, you know, rocket to superstardom, so to speak. What do you guys imagine the future holding for Gwen? I mean, I'll start with you, Eirik, because you've kind of done a lot about him previously. I'll put you on the spot here. I mean,
I'm fine. Of course, I'm gonna be ballsy. I'm gonna say something. I'm trying to do what I'm doing in Trackmania simply because I want to catch the train before it. I'm sort of, or I'm gonna try to put it into English phrase. I want to be on the train before it goes. Like, if Trackmania blows up, I want to be known as the sort of guy to cover it. Because I think if this somehow blows up and becomes somewhat massive, then I think it's harder for a guy like me, who's maybe not the perfect English speaker, maybe not have a journalistic background, to eventually get into the scene and get to know these players. So that's why I want to position myself. Imagine if this game now suddenly breaks out, pops up, becomes mainstream. I think everybody wants to be Gwen then. He's 15 years old. He's becoming one of the best players. And then he's going to become the best players once this game is blowing up. And he still has a future in this game. So going forward, I think he might be so lucky that he can potentially somewhat live from it. He can sort of maybe know that, okay, I'm from France. Trackmania is big in France. I can probably get an org to support me. Now Trackmania Grand League is here. That's some sort of financial security, even though if Zerator is going to pull out. And even I don't think Zerator is going to pull out. So still we have Zerator doing his stuff. So I think he is going to know that Trackmania is a potential future for him. Maybe not as a full career, but maybe he doesn't have to think about a side job. Maybe he doesn't have to think about stuff like that. So I think the future is great. And I think he's lucky that he's born when he's born. I think he's lucky once the sort of factors come into Trackmania that is hopefully helping this game eventually grow. And he's going to be one of the first guys on this train, and he's probably going to sit the longest on this train simply because he doesn't have these things to think about, like you mentioned that maybe Carl Jr. soon have to get a full-time job. Maybe eventually he gets kids like Tamarillo, or Gwen is the perfect age, perfect skill, perfect place to be born in, and the future is great for him if Trackmania's future is great. So yeah, let's go vice versa, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and like I think he's in the perfect position to take advantage of, you know, what is then to come in this game. If it's of course going to be good, you know, if it's going to break out like we want it to, if the Trackmania Grand League experiment works, and you know, if all this kind of investment that they've been putting into this new game does eventually then reap fruits, he is, as you say, in the perfect position to benefit from it. I mean, he is apart from Evon, he is significantly younger than pretty much all of the other Trackmania Grand League participants. So, I mean, we've always spoken about it. We're speaking it in a kind of argument against, you know, how does the kind of French community benefit compared to the international community? As we've spoken about, a lot of the top level players in the international community being, you know, in some cases 10-year veterans. They're not going to be staying in this game forever. We're talking about people in their 20s and their late 20s in some cases. These are guys who will eventually move on, and there's not as much time in the clock left for them as there is for someone like Gwen, who's got many years in front of him. And I would say video games in general, esports, if I can encapsulate it into, is a young man's game. You know, it is a game which, when you're seeing a new kind of prodigy coming into the game, they're not 28 years old. You know, they're not 30 years old. They're 15 years old. They're 14 years old. Something like that. It's almost the same when you look at any other esport that gets played. Counter-Strike, your new up-and-coming players are all early teens, you know? So I think that, I mean, I'm sure there's like physical, you know, kind of mental kind of differences between, you know, like say for example, when you're younger, you absorb more information, you learn quicker, for example. I don't know how much, I don't know really a lot about that. I mean, I'd certainly advise you guys to do your kind of own study into that, but it is a young man's game. You know, he is in the perfect position, as I said, to kind of capitalize from it. But I mean, so moving forward then for Gwen, I mean, Turbo, I mean, you as I said, you've been casting a lot of his kind of tournaments the past year. You've seen what he's done in the Zerator Cup this year. He's in Trackmania Grand League. Now, Eirik has, of course, talked about his kind of side bet, so to speak, for him to be top 3 in the upcoming TMGL season. We've seen, of course, him winning Zerator Cup. What do you think that means for the upcoming tournaments, the likes of your Trackmania Grand League? How do you rate his chances for these upcoming events? Now that instead of him being the underdog, instead of him being the up-and-comer, he's already on the map now. He's essentially now going to be on the other side of the odds, so to speak.
Yeah, so people will definitely have like expectations coming into the new season, because now we could have seen like one of the first times, excluding now the test match, where Gwen has played against Carl Jr., who is arguably the best, or one of the top 3 players out there, and he has actually beaten him. So maybe this could put some pressure on his shoulders not to be the underdog coming from the OGL, but beating like one of the top 3 players who are actually in the Trackmania Grand League. So it is a very, very hard topic, but I think that he will eventually perform good despite having that like not underdog position anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it is kind of putting yourself on another side of the kind of odds, so to. I mean, it is an interesting position for him to be put in, but I think it comes into more as part of him being in a perfect position. I mean, when you have this as him growing up, we are seeing Gwen kind of grow up through the in front of us. You know, he is, as we said, only 15 years old. I mean, I certainly had a lot of growing up to do when I was 15. You know, it's the same as I'm sure for him, and having him growing up in terms of, if we're talking to a performance on a player's side of things, I think it's, if you're growing up competing against the very best players in the very best tournaments, it's going to come into being it's going to come into him developing. I mean, we see players nowadays who kind of experience tournaments quite late on in their cycle. Like, say, in my case, I mean, I came into Trackmania Tech, you know, when I was 21 or something like that. You know, I've already kind of grown up a little bit by that time, and I found it quite difficult to adjust to the kind of stresses of, you know, being in high pressure matches and things like that. But when he's going through his teens, competing against the very best players in the world, competing in your top level tournaments, I mean, being at 15 and having already won some of your biggest events that are in this game, I think that prepares you extremely well for, you know, even just his life in general, and also for his future in Trackmania. I mean, we talk about Carl Jr. obviously being one of the coolest heads in the game, and I would say his kind of trajectories being similar, albeit starting a little bit later. I mean, do you imagine I'm kind of talking a bit out of term when we might be seeing a next kind of Carl Jr. type ascendancy, Eirik, or do you think a kind of Carl Jr. comes once in a lifetime?
I think I'm mentioning that argument that maybe it's fun for the next event, that maybe now you have this argument coming into Bercy that is Carl versus Bren is hype, but then eventually Carl is going to have probably less time and Gwen is going to have more and more time. So eventually it's going to be like Gwen versus the rest, like it's Carl Jr. versus the rest now. I don't hope that that's the case, because I like it, like you mentioned now 1 hour ago, that it's just fun to have more factors or more contenders for the actual win. So you don't have like, if he wins, then it's a surprise, and if he doesn't win, then it's a surprise. So I think we're maybe drawing too many lines too fast here now. He won one event. Sure, that can, of course, be something. Sure, I believe he's going to be probably the best player in, let's say, 2 years' time, but it's still 2 years until I believe he's going to be solidified as the best player. I think if you just talk about the next major event, that I talk now with, I don't know, pretty much everyone in the Trackmania Grand League since the release. Carl Jr. said Trackmania Grand League is better, or not better, but more prestige. Gwen said that same. Papu said the same. Kappa, all of them are saying Trackmania Grand League is the event to win now. So now you get the full picture of it. Who is going to take it most serious? Who is going to be the best one? And you know that Trackmania Grand League is something that's probably going to stick around simply because it's an official event. So if you just look at the long term, who is going to be remembered in the history book as the best player, being good at Trackmania Grand League is probably better than being good at Zerator Cup. So I don't know, Scotty, you want to take your bet back and maybe say that Gwen is going to be top 3 in Trackmania Grand League, or do you just think that Zerator Cup is his style of maps? Maybe he's specialized at this, and maybe once he comes to Trackmania Grand League, then he's going to have a harder time against the likes of Pack, Kappa, and of course Carl Jr., who put on the performance of his career in the last season. So don't forget about that. Just
Yeah, I mean, in terms of that, I think I wouldn't really take much from when I was looking at his performance in the Zerator Cup. I wasn't necessarily looking at how he would, what his skill level was like. What I was more going to be concentrating on is how he would perform at the very top level. Would he be consistent? Would his kind of mental game hold out? As that seemed to be, as Turbo was mentioning, the only thing that he seemed to be lacking. The skill level is there, but it's like the on and off switch about knowing when to risk and when to save, for example. How to approach these sort of top level events. You know, we've seen a lot of, I remember Tween going quite in depth into how he approached the kind of the mentality of competing at the top level. And I think that was the biggest question mark for me about Gwen, as he showed in OGL that he does have the skill level and he does have the pace at the very least to keep up with the top players. The only question now, which seems to have been more answered by Zerator Cup, is whether or not he would be able to perform at the biggest stages against the very best players in the world. And I believe he has now shown that in the Zerator Cup, albeit in a different kind of setting. But I suppose, while you do have similar players like Holdal, Bren, Carl Jr., of course, being part of the Zerator Cup and being part of the late stages, I think Trackmania Grand League is a different beast. It is a different kind of player, and it is different, a different kind of circumstance to perform in. But I think he does have a tremendous opportunity. I'm kind of torn between whether or not I think he'll get top 3 or not. I believe he's definitely going to be in contention. The way I look at it, I believe he does have a strong enough mentality to get into the late stages of the tournament, no problem. I think he's going to thrive in the round stages of the tournament. He's going to be like a Kappa. He might struggle a little bit when it comes to the 6 lappers. I believe he'll still be within the top 8, no problem at all. I'm talking necessarily in terms of first, second, third kind of thing. However, when it comes to the round stage, I believe he will thrive, and he definitely has a very strong chance to get top 3. But for Trackmania Grand League and all that, I think there's too many variables to kind of call it straight away, but I'll just play the devil's advocate so you'll have someone to say you told you so to. I'll say he'll be close, but he'll maybe get 4th, for example, in Trackmania Grand League, but definitely has a really, really great chance. But yeah, I mean, I can only hope that of course, he played so many tournaments last year. We were talking, Turbo, about him playing all of these smaller tournaments and things like that, and playing for so much last year. And I can only hope that moving forward, he's not going to go in the direction that some of the other top players have. I mean, you have, Pac, who plays 1 tournament a year. You have Carl Jr. plays 2 tournaments a year. Kappa plays 2 tournaments a year. I can only hope that kind of skill level is going to be seen more often, so to speak, because that's kind of something I feel that, especially the online scene. Well, I mean, I suppose the Zerator Cup's technically been the online scene. It's something that I believe the online scene's really suffered from, as a lot of the top level players are just kind of sticking to what's valuable to them. I think that's kind of fair to say in terms of that. But I mean, do you guys have any other kind of points about Gwen you think we've missed?
I think also a false narrative is to say that he's just a risky player. I'm now sort of cheating. I'm looking at the combined stats. He won 3 of the 4 things. And I think he was actually the most superior on was the Champions mode. First map, number 2. Second map, number 2. And then he won the 4 last maps. He played against Pac. He played against Bren. People like we expect to be maybe a contender for a podium spot, if not to win. So I think we should not just say that he's a risky player. I think Gwen is also a strong mental player. He knows where he's at. He knows if he needs to risk, then he can risk. But I think if you go into my betting league and think that I'm not gonna place Gwen up there because he cannot be average, did you even watch Open Grand League then? Because I think maybe Gwen can have a stronger challenge, or I don't think I agree with myself there, but I think he can be good at both things. I was going to say that he was going to be better in Champions mode than Rounds mode, but I think eventually I'm now questioning if I'm going to go from like double or nothing. Like, should I be happy about winning your bet with just being top 3? Or should I now say that I believe he's going to win it? I'm not sure yet, because I still think it's Carl Jr., but it depends actually if there is offline event or not. I spoke a little bit with Gwen today. I'm maybe going to spoil something and say that the full interview is out tomorrow, by the way, on my YouTube channel, to go and subscribe. But he said that he didn't feel like this event was a big event. He felt that this was like a same event simply because it was online. While last year we were both playing in front of a stage, and then he felt that that was something special. And if the Trackmania Grand League is also just online, I might just go double or nothing and say he's going to win it.
That's a fair assessment. I think the one thing I'd kind of like to see from Gwen is, we've seen throughout his rise, especially through the last kind of year and a half, that it has been domination. Online events he's been winning or getting second or maybe third in some cases, with exception of things that he's either not been specialised in, as in, say Gamers Assembly when he was playing in tech, or something like Zerator Cup where, he missed out despite performing well. I'll be interested to see if he does come into the very biggest stage, which, as you were saying, a lot of the players do feel is Trackmania Grand League, and if he doesn't perform well straight away. So your players like Scrappy, Carl Jr., Bren, Pac, Kappa, Tween, if they all perform to their best level and Gwen isn't immediately able to match up to that, how he then responds to that, because I don't think Gwen's been on the back foot in quite a long time in his Trackmania career. And I'm interested to see if that does happen and how he'll respond to that. I mean, I personally think he will perform well, but I don't believe it's all going to be smooth sailing in Trackmania Grand League. He's got a much stricter challenge than he would have experienced in a lot of the other tournaments, with the exception of, you know, your Zerator Cup, although that's a much different style and it kind of demands a kind of different skill set from you. But I'd be very interested to see if he does get put on the back foot and how he will then respond to that, you know, because it's not a position we've really seen Gwen in, and something that he is invested in, you know, if something he really cares about, if he's not performing as well as he wants to. But that's at least my kind of take on it.
Just put in, I mean, last year at the Zerator Trackmania Cup, he played duo mode with Wingo Bear. He was essentially the reason why they didn't qualify into the grand final. The dude was crying, or the boy was crying backstage. He was heartbroken. And now it's the next edition of that cup. He was not going to be affected by that. So, again, I think maybe he's so young that he's like, that's so long ago. I mean, once you are 14 to 15, that's going to feel longer than once you are, let's say, my age. It simply feels like a week. And since I was 25 and now I'm 26. But I think, sure, it's going to be a storyline to follow if that's going to be from week to week. Now we had 1 year to recap. But I think it's actually good to put stuff behind him as well, because it's one thing to fail as an own player, but imagine failing and being the reason why your duo doesn't qualify and to play in front of 8,000 people. You're 14 years old. That is essentially probably the whole thing you care about for that week. You dreamt about it. You didn't care about anything else in life, and you sort of let down the teammate that was gonna carry, essentially. So I think Gwen is old. Now it's gonna turn into like an episode where I'm just praising Gwen, like I've done in all the casts I've done with him. But it's maybe the only guy I'm fanboying of. So excuse me if I'm biased.
I mean, I have one point as well that you brought up. I mean, we are, like, the people who are older are sorrying about other things, and he has like his school that he is passing, and then Trackmania if he's practicing a lot. I don't know, but I mean, you said that. I mean, Trackmania is his world, and he can still develop, he can still learn the game, and I think he has not reached his peak yet, unless other players, for example me, I tryharded last year. I know that I could have been on the top level, but I had too many breaks. So I'm not gonna go for like a professional career. And I think Brand has arrived on his destination yet. So I think we're gonna see him improving, and eventually, like other players who are as young as Gwen, or maybe a little bit older, like Sarah or so, being a rising star, like going up to like the most prestigious events as well.
Oh, that's Eirik gone again. But I mean, in terms of this, I think, yeah, I mean, I don't think he has reached his peak yet. I mean, I don't think you do reach your peak at 15. I mean, the only kind of comparison I can think of off the top of my head when we look at, you know, other kind of prodigies that are really coming up through esports at the moment would be someone like Zaiwu from Counter-Strike. He was, you know, voted the best player of the year through the last year, but he's been developing, and I believe he's now 17 or 18 or something like that. And a lot of people say he's still got his best years ahead of him. So I definitely think as long as Trackmania affords him the opportunity to stay in it, you know, through his later teens, then definitely we've not seen the best, and not even close, I think, of Gwen, and it will be definitely quite a scary beast to behold going forward into the next stages of the game. And who knows? I mean, might be 5-10 years from now we'll be talking about another face on the Mount Rushmore of Trackmania, I suppose. But guys, have we talked enough about Gwen, or do we think?
Should we just predict Trackmania Grand League?
Okay, let's predict the position from Gwen in the end.
Right, Gwen in the end. I'll say he'll get fourth.
Okay.
I'll say Pac, Carl Jr. will beat him. That's who I'll say too will beat him, and Scrappy.
Okay, and Turbo?
I think that Pac, actually Scrappy and Carl Jr. will beat them, and he will get third.
Nobody beats. He's number one. He's gonna win it.
Oh, he's saying it now. He's saying it now.
And if that was wrong, I'm just gonna go back to, I don't know, the start of Trackmania Grand League. Once I said that he's gonna be top 3, so I look somewhat smart if he plays top 3. But if he gets 1, I'm gonna use this clip on Twitter, and the power of my Twitter, I can sort of fake media everything. So yeah, Eirik, the biggest Gwen fan, yeah, I guess so. But I'm the fan of best player in Trackmania, so why not be a fan of him? I'm a fan of everyone. I'm a fan of everyone. Unless they are not... If they are my skill level in Trackmania, then I might not be a fan of you. But if you're better than me, I might be a fan of you.
Yeah, for sure. But just as we have already reached the 1.5 hour mark, we did have another topic we were wanting to touch on today. I suppose it's not as much of a big topic as the Zerator Cup. I mean, not that I mean to diminish any topics we talk about, of course, but another tournament which has been kind of going on within the past few weeks is the Pittsburgh Knights all-round circuit, which was recently brought in. Of course, the organisation got involved in Trackmania Grand League and have decided to get more involved in the Trackmania scene overall. Now, I know you've not been able to follow this as much, Eirik, but I mean, knowing the fact that an organisation has decided to get involved so much in Trackmania, in a sense of, you know, getting a tournament going, really, well, of course, sponsoring a player in the first place. I mean, what was your take on the fact when you heard they were getting involved to such an extent on the all-round circuit?
Well, I think this is what Trackmania needs. That, okay, cool, Ubisoft, they have contacted them to get into the Trackmania Grand League, but do they care about being there, or they just, okay, I can sponsor a player there? But this is an example of an org actually caring. They want to invest into Trackmania. And I'm not surprised by seeing that Pittsburgh Knights is actually the org that does this. Ever since they was announced, they have been active on Twitter. They have posted memes. They have posted stuff about Tween. They have even gotten Tween to be active on Twitter. The only time Tween posted before on Twitter was that I qualified for ESWC. I'm going to try to qualify for Zerator Cup. The rest of the year was basically nothing. Now he's more or less posting weekly and multiple times each week. So they just create some dynamic by hosting stuff. They have given life to one of the biggest profiles in the history of this game with Tween. But I'm still not sure about how big this tournament has the impact on the scene. I think they want to host this to maybe create life in North America. I'm not sure about how many North American players are playing. I saw the Knights stream. I think 70k, I wish, 70 viewers. So not a lot of hype around it, but maybe it eventually catches up because it's still just the qualification stage. And maybe once you end up with, I believe it's some sort of playoff, then maybe people get hyped for the next edition and hopefully motivate them to do more stuff. But I wish we could see more of this. So only positive things to say about Pittsburgh doing this, but I wish it was a little bit more hyped. But I might be a fault of that. I might be misreading that. It might be a hype in the community, but I'm simply being too much into Zerator bubble that I have not catch the other stuff happening in the community.
What about you, Turbo? Have you seen anything? What's your thoughts on PKARC so far?
I mean, I have. We're speaking with a geek about it, but actually, besides the exposure from spam and on Twitter, I have not really seen too much from it. Actually, I mean, there was something. I didn't even know the track actually, so I've not followed this competition at all because there was the Zerator Cup and everything. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about it because you have played it yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I played the first week. I managed to get through to the top 16, which meant I was then in the weekly playoff, so to speak. I did finish 15th to 16th. I don't really recall my final position, but I got to the top 16, so I'll be able to, fly my flag about it and not tell anyone about how not as many people followed the first week and just kind of hide that fact in the background. But I mean, my kind of impression of the event has been so far, it's a really nice idea. It does feel like it's kind of used a lot of elements from other competitions. I mean, it feels almost like a Trackmania Grand League combine, just without some of the parts of it, so to speak. So, I mean, I like the idea of it, but for example, one of the main problems I had with the event and what I feel has kind of been what we're now seeing the symptoms of is when I only knew that the first map had been released when I saw someone streaming it. I didn't see the information being posted on Discord. I didn't see the information being posted on Twitter. And I didn't see people getting involved in it. And I mean, I probably wouldn't have qualified to the top 16 if that many people got involved in it. So I can count my kind of lucky stars in terms of that. I mean, I managed to catch on to it in one of the last days that the time attack was open, and luckily I'm a bit of a fast learner. But I mean, I think the the Cup has a nice idea, but the execution hasn't been as great as some people have liked. There's been a lot of issues with the rule book. The first week was something like 5 hours long or something like that, because each match was done individually. You know, people had problems with the point system because you were having people who were getting first and last beating people who were getting second and second, for example. So there was a lot of kind of confusion about the Cup in the first week or two and things like that. It wasn't really clear what you were supposed to do to get to the later stages, and it seems a lot of things are getting changed as it goes along. So it feels like this is a kind of tester for a future tournament, and I think it has also came at a bad time. I mean, I know they're trying to capitalise upon the interest of the new game coming out, but it has came, you know, around the Trackmania Grand League show match, around the Zerator Cup, and I believe that has, you know, really not been in their favour, so to speak. I mean, I can only hope they take the approach that I hoped for in Trackmania Grand League, where they would throw out a kind of beta edition to kind of find out the lay of the land in the game, get their feet wet and, you know, the new idea that they wanted to bring across, and then really bring in a proper full-fledged season which has been planned out and executed well. You know, they've got the right people involved, the hype's there, the players are invested, you know. Whereas it kind of feels like this has all been kind of, I know there has been planning going into this. I'm just going to say my outlook on it. It feels like it's all kind of been thrown together, and it's not necessarily had the kind of coverage it needs in order to get people invested in it. I mean, as you were kind of saying there, it had 70 viewers on the official channel, and well, I think viewers comes down a lot to who's casting it rather than, you know, the interest in the event itself. I would say that's not necessarily a success so far, and I don't think it kind of comes back into how we were talking about the Zerator Cup. I don't think there's enough of a reward for some of your top players to bother playing essentially a Trackmania Grand League level of playing, you know, 6 weeks qualifying for top 16 and then playing a full playoff, you know, day on the Sunday, I believe it is, and then doing the same every week and then a separate playoff after that for a significantly lower reward than they would get from Trackmania Grand League. And I believe it's kind of suffered from it that way. But, I mean, it's kind of hard to say how... I mean, Eirik, you've of course been following a lot, although you have kind of missed a little bit of the Pittsburgh Knights side of things. I mean, just simply from what I've said about that, would you kind of put it more down to the fact that you've had these kind of other tournaments coming about that is really suffering from? I mean, I know you said before we went live that you didn't really know that much about it, and it would be primarily, say for example, myself and Turbo that would be talking about it. But from someone who's so involved in the community, to not know about it, not know a lot about it, it does speak a little bit for yourself being, of course, more focused on Zerator Cup, which is a fair point, but you would have known about it from yourself being so involved because it just would have popped up. People would have wanted to talk to you about it. You would have seen it, a lot of information in your timeline. I mean, is that kind of reflect, does that reflect anywhere into your head that if it really mattered that much, I would have naturally got more engaged in it, as in, you know, say I would have been coming to talk to you a lot more about it, or other people would be asking you a lot more about it. How have you kind of felt about that side of things? I mean, just even gauging the hype from not being as invested in it due to you kind of being part of other projects.
It's either one of two things. Either I'm bad at the job I'm supposed to do by bringing stuff up that is happening in the community, or it hasn't been promoted the correct way. Or maybe it's been promoted the correct way, but maybe promoted at the wrong time. Like, natural people are going to care about Zerator Cup because Zerator Cup has a history. Maybe people are going to care about other stuff happening in the new game, simply the campaign, the show match. So just by using this sort of time to gain the hype of the new game might actually be maybe not the easiest time to actually launch something. Simply do think that, okay, it's a new game, it's going to be hype, and then if you throw an event, then that is going to get players, it's going to get hype because people are going to be hyped about it. But maybe it's too unclear at the moment. Events, I think the event tab in the game itself is not fully developed yet, so it's going to be hard for players to maybe find stuff simply because it's so much to find out about the game itself at the moment. And then, of course, the Zerator Cup is just going to put I think shadow is a wrong word, but I'm going to put a shadow as the word because it's essentially going to catch everything about it. But I know Geek, who is essentially behind it, he has put a lot of hours, put a lot of thought in it. Speak to him, he's really passionate about it. I know that Pittsburgh Knights are passionate about it. The Tween has been passionate about it. So I don't necessarily think it's just a last minute thing to throw into like, oh, we need to do something. But maybe it could have been better executed. Maybe they could have gotten an event org to host it for them. Let's say that, I don't know, Huntmania, Trackmania Open, Draconia. Simply people that, if they promote it, then it's going to reach out to Trackmania players. If Pittsburgh Knights promote it, then maybe it gets promoted to their fans, but maybe they don't care too much about it. But I might realize that it's hard to catch everything in Trackmania, so maybe it's time for someone else to help me by covering this new game. I mean, I'm working now. I'm not just having easy job now. Now I'm working. Today I work 12 hours a day, so I can be as much as I want on Twitter, but I'm going to miss something. And if I miss something, I'm going to feel bad about it, but maybe not entirely my fault on missing out this one. But yeah, I hope it's gonna, I think the future is great for this event. I think it's just gonna progress, and in the end we're gonna forget about the sort of, in my I'm talking a lot now, but in my Discord I was like seeing a post on Twitter about Pittsburgh Knights posting it's the last day to hunt or set a time top 16, and then I was like in my Discord like, wait, has it started? And then G-Geek was like, no, it starts tomorrow with the top 16. I was like, but how do you get top 16? It's like, yeah, you had 1 week to hunt it. I was like, so the event has started? So it was like, the event has started, but not started. It was a little bit confusing, but yeah, we forget about that in the future, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, taking the, with of course, kind of coming out of the Zerator Cup shadow in the coming weeks, while this cup would be in duration, it's kind of a question I'd put to both of you, but I'll ask you this first, Turbo. With us coming out of the Zerator Cup shadow, and now there will be, of course, Trackmania Grand League coming up and things like that, an Open Grand League, is the Pittsburgh Knights ARC something that in this kind of break you're going to be focusing on, either as a player or just simply investing yourself into finding more about it, you know, watching the streams of it and things like that, catching up with it as you will? Or do you not kind of feel that impact from it? Is it just kind of going to be a step or something to keep you busy before Open Grand League, so to speak? I mean, what's your kind of feeling of it so far, so to speak?
So I think that it didn't really catch my attention that much. I mean, I still have to check what the maps are about because, like Eirik said, there was a shadow from the Zerator Cup. People were busy beforehand. And I mean, it's the first cup that Pittsburgh Knights are organizing. So I think that this will develop in a good direction eventually if the maps or the map are good. I think it's only one map, isn't it?
One map per week.
Okay, yeah. If it's one map and it really gets my interest, then I'm gonna play it and give it a try. But other than that, I mean, there are other competitions, and me as a streamer, I want to like organize my own competition next week as well, just to fill the time between Trackmania Grand League and to just get in some new hype about like a new competition. Also, Virtual's doing this backward competition, which is a really unique style, not gonna lie. And yeah, I think I might give it a try, but I won't try hard it that much. So yeah. And I think they should have like a little bit more of like publicity to the Trackmania community, because 70 views, that's like not a lot for a Trackmania competition.
Yeah, but I think they're actually trying to promote it, but maybe they fail to, because you see on Twitter at least they're posting like, this guy's the top 16 this week, they're gonna play at this time, and then they post the results. So, but then maybe Trackmania people ain't following them, and maybe the following of Pittsburgh Knights is like, okay, another post from them, but it's Twitter, so I just scroll through it. Twitter is basically a platform for short span attention. If you see something, maybe you like it, press it. If not, you scroll and forget about it. But if they get someone in the Trackmania community to start promoting it, start putting their effort into it and not only posting one time a week, but remembering people constantly that this day you have on Monday you're going to play and you have 1 week to set a time to be top 16. Eventually that's going to be the back of the head, like TTC is on Tuesday. Oh, nice. On Thursdays at 20 CST. Like our show is at Tuesdays at the 21 CST. So sort of trying to get this momentum into people's brain that now it's PKR coming up. And I think that is already happening. Maybe PKR should thank like one of the biggest streamers in spam. I think he actually showcased it a lot, telling a funny story about how he was almost out, but actually try hard at it off stream and eventually qualified. So I think the ball is slowly but surely running, and the more it gets into the Trackmania community, the better it would just get, and eventually people are going to be happy about playing this sort of cup. But it's left to see if it's just going to be a cup for the top players that can be top 16, or if like a casual players will care about it. But I think that's actually what they wanted, to have like casual players also having fun and not only the top players. But if it's just top 16, why should I play it? Right?
Yeah, for sure. I know where you're coming from, but just to kind of bring it back to the original point there, I mean, you have, of course, mentioned that you're working a lot now and things like that, and you didn't manage to catch on to the initial kind of, week 1, week 2 and things like that. Just to kind of relay the same kind of question I did to Turbo, I mean, is this something you'll kind of prioritise getting involved in your area of Trackmania, being the more journalistic side of things? Or, as I was kind of saying, do you kind of just view this as something to kind of fill the time before Trackmania Grand League really kind of starts getting up and rolling?
So you mean the Pittsburgh Knights Cups, or in general, what? I would say that it's more like filling up the time, because I mean it's their first competition, but I mean, I don't really know much about this competition. That's the problem. So I can't really like make up my opinion. That's the problem here. I mean, I know that top 16 qualifies on one map, but other than that, I don't know what the prize pool is. I don't know like anything. I don't even know what the track looks about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's like a thing that's I mean, I'm active on Twitter, but I've not seen a lot from it,
Just wait until I start actually caring about this, then Twitter feed Halo. But yeah, I think I actually will eventually care more about it. I actually uploaded a video of the winning round. And I feel, I don't think I feel bad about it, because I normally don't care about I don't normally feel bad about stuff, but I feel like it's my responsibility to tell people what's happening in Trackmania. I try to even follow when Turbo is casting smaller cups that maybe gets like, I don't know, 50 views, but I still upload it to Twitter and people see a highlight of that cast and eventually gets 2K views. So just trying to promote Trackmania on Twitter and then promoting what is happening, that there is life in Trackmania besides the Zerator, is life besides Trackmania Grand League. And when you get a name like Pittsburgh Knights, that is probably known for even not esports fans, that they are invested in this game, then maybe they get curious about it. And then my end goal of actually getting more people invested in Trackmania with my activity on Twitter, eventually it's going to work out. So now I'm going to stop slacking, even though I work a lot now in real life as well. I'm going to try to promote other cups as well, not only the Zerator Trackmania Cup. But hey, I posted like 500 tweets of the Zerator Trackmania Cup, so give me a break, right?
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, the important thing is about it is a developing story, so to speak. It's something that we'll be able to catch up on.
To judge, right?
Yeah, it's something we'll be able to catch up on through the later weeks and kind of refine our kind of outlook on it once we've seen how it's developed. Because even from week 1 to 2, it was developing. There's a lot more people playing in week 2. There was more attention. People knew what was happening. So we'll definitely be able to catch up to it for the weeks up and coming. But I mean, just to kind of round us off for today, of course, we have actually got a few questions that have came into us. I mean, would you guys, of course, we've got some of the questions pulled up here. Is there any specific questions you guys wanted to address or bring up that you'd seen through your respective chats that you think's an kind of important point to look at the moment? I'll give you guys a little bit of time to look through it.
I mean, I had one question here. Did Bad Lulu miss the opportunity Gwen grabbed? He's extremely good, but it feels like he kind of got overshadowed in no time.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I can kind of take that point and run with it a little bit. As I was thinking about that one when it first got posted, like what we were just kind of talking about when we're addressing about Bad Lulu and such as that Bad Lulu, you only really ever see him playing 1 or 2 tournaments, or maybe a tournament every blue moon, as we like to say here. But whereas you've seen Gwen in virtually everything throughout 2019, and it feels as if Bad Lulu really just hasn't stayed as active as Gwen. And I think if he really did kind of capitalise, because it's not as if that he didn't have the same kind of hype around him. I mean, he qualified to the Zerator Cup playoffs when I think he was 14 or something like that back in 2017, I want to say. I can't recall exactly, but he did qualify to Zerator Cup playoffs, being an extremely young man, of course, and has had the kind of, like, he was part of Team PAX, he's been involved with Domingo and things like that. But it seems to be the amount of effort that he's been putting into the game, or at least the amount of competitions he's been spending time in to refine his skills and such, just really hasn't been even close to the same level as what Gwen's putting in. And I believe now that you're seeing the dividends for that. You're seeing Gwen has now ascended. He's had people were talking about Bad Lulu, in 2017. Mm-hmm. Would he be a player that would be able to evolve into something more, to be an elite level player at this sort of level? But people aren't talking about him as much now because he's not playing tournaments. You're not seeing him compete at this sort of thing. And I think I mean, I don't know what's going on in Bad Lulu's life. I don't know if there is reasons he's not playing as much. If he's just playing some other games or whatever the fuck's going on, it's down to him. I mean, of course, I'd be happy to have that clarified from anyone who knows kind of on the inside. But I think if he wanted to be in Gwen's position, he had the opportunity. But that's a one-time opportunity, in my opinion. That's the way I look.
I mean, he's 17 years old still, so if he wants to care about it, he can care about it. But this is also weird for me because now I get so used to actually knowing what the players think. I even got, not inside Gwen's head, but I actually got to ask Gwen some questions in English, got to get the feeling of him. But Balulu is one of these guys that doesn't really want to come on to speak with me about interviews. He said he doesn't necessarily like to do interviews. Mm-hmm. Fair, but still then the Trackmania community missed out on what are you thinking about Trackmania? Are we just going to make up our own assumptions about you, or are you going to come on and just try to explain people about who you are, what character you have, what goals do you have? Are you actually caring about just the Zerator Trackmania Cup or Trackmania overall? But he has been, like you mentioned, the first time he was on was in 17, then he was 14 years old. But since then he has been in the semifinal every year, but still not in the grand final. So maybe it's a little bit of a curse as well that maybe he's been unlucky. Now he faced off against number 1 and number 2 in the semifinal. So maybe if he played against Aurel and Bren, maybe he would have a chance. So somewhat unlucky with the semifinals, but at the same time, I don't understand. I don't know how serious he takes it, simply because I haven't been able to actually get a talk with him. And that's unfamiliar with me. I am somewhat able to actually talk with whoever I want in Trackmania besides Kari and Frostbull and now Bad Lulu, the famous trio that doesn't want to come on.
Hello. Besides us, the famous trio. Hello.
Yeah. The unfamous trio are we, and they are the famous trio.
Yeah, we're the useless trio.
Yeah.
But I mean, sticking with you, Eirik, was there any sort of questions you wanted to kind of highlight on at all?
I think it was sort of I think it's maybe a wider topic, but we can try to put it into a few words, because Alexis are as what need the game to become a world-known esport game. And I think that is also something that I saw arguments in the chat or on Twitter or in Discord, like, just imagine if this was cast in English, 250,000 viewers easily. Then you fail to understand that the Zerator fans tuning in, not Trackmania fans. Mm-hmm. But is there, like, if you are to explain to a casual viewer, why is this game so big now, but why can it not be so big when it's English, and what is there to change without going on for an hour more?
Yeah, so, sorry.
Okay, I mean, I would say that it's the uniqueness of Zerator. I mean, you have mentioned it beforehand, and I think the point you brought up there is right, because he is doing a show with the with the tournaments and what he brought to the game, like what he did, also like involving it to the Z-LAN and everything. I think it is, like we are at the standpoints where there is like a sub, like a style, not Nadeo tech. There is like Zerator style, and this all developed in 2017. I mean, myself, I've played for Team Eden, and I've seen all those players like Ben Sword, Sika, even Across, who are now like in the top spots here in this game, playing and rising up from those competitions. And I would say that Zerator actually has really fostered this game. And what was the question like again? Like, can you repeat it again?
Like, how can this game become a world-known game? Because having 140,000 viewers is also like it's a world-known, but it's in French.
Yeah, I mean the format itself is like easy to understand. I've actually shown some clips to my friends who didn't know what's going on. But I mean, it's like a streamer who like stands behind the game like Zerator does and like lives for the game, really likes it, and also organizes a competition so that we can create more hype and also like getting new people into the game. I mean, we got that with the new game, but I mean, it's nowhere near like games like Valorant or League of Legends or whatever, or maybe even Counter-Strike. So we need an English-speaking streamer who really stands behind that game and can like infect people for the Trackmania, like joy or like fascination.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I find to give a comprehensive answer to this would, as you say, Eirik, it would take us another hour.
Yeah,
but
indeed.
One of the key points I kind of want to separate here without going too much into it is separating what we know as an esport. In my opinion, I guess you guys maybe won't comprehensively agree with me, but I don't see Trackmania Grand League as being an out-and-out esport. I don't see Zerator Cup being esport. I see these as being showcases. Sure, they're competitions, but I differentiate between that and being out-and-out esport. So for me, an esport would have been, say your Gamers Assembly tournaments in the different styles, your World Championships in years gone past. That to me is an esport, when the sole goal of the tournament is to find out who the best player is at that at the level, of course. Whereas a lot of the kind of focus around Trackmania Grand League behind the scenes was to get as much exposure as possible, and that impacted some of the decisions they made about who streamed it, what maps were chosen and things like that, how the identity thing all kind of came into it. So I've always kind of viewed these kind of cups as more of a showcase. So as I said, I mean, when you look into another not a comparable esport, but if you look at something like Formula One, for example. So you had them doing the virtual Grand Prix recently as a result of the COVID-19, and they had a bunch of real Formula One drivers plus some streamer personalities and things like that. These guys are all great drivers, of course, but that's not esport. That's a showcase of the game. That's designed to get all of these sort of players into it. Whereas they have their separated, I forget exactly what it's called, but they have their own World Championship where they will have the best drivers competing in a format that's specifically designed to be, I mean, I hate to use the term as if this just encompasses what I'm trying to say here, but it's designed to be an esport. It's not they've not made decisions like, oh, we're gonna fucking start them on different tires or something like that, so that it will be more interesting to watch, or we're gonna make the best guy slower because it's more interesting to watch, or something like that. They're not making decisions to make it better to watch. The decisions are to put the players in the best possible scenario so that the best possible players will shine through. So I feel that a lot of the decisions made for Trackmania Grand League, and well, especially Zerator Cup, I mean, he's been completely open that is a showcase. That's for the fans. That's not designed to be a competitor's competition, if you get what I'm saying there. So, I mean, the only thing I can really say for what it needs is it needs to be a long-term process of building up your competitive communities again, of investing in real esport competitions. If it's going to be multi-style, you can have multi-style maps which are technical. We've seen it in the likes of the Stadium Esports League from 2015-16. We've seen I suppose you can say the multi-style maps the likes of Spam put out for his tournaments.
The French regional.
That's a perfect example very recently of that. We've seen how this can be an esport while still encompassing the multi-style. Or even if you go back to the traditional approach of tech tournaments, dirt tournaments, full speed tournaments, even RPG tournaments and things like that. That's how you get it. That's esport to me. TMGL and all that isn't esport. That's just the way I look at it in terms of that. As I don't know if you guys would kind of agree with me on that, but as I say, if we go too much into that, we're going to be here until fucking midnight. So maybe that's a topic which would be interesting to discuss in future episodes. I think it is definitely kind of worth going into a little bit, but I think you kind of need to rebuild the true competition in the game once they've accomplished whatever goal they set out to with the Trackmania Grand League, bringing people back to the game and then reinforcing the competitive side or the esports side of the game. I believe would then be the next step to transition into being a world-known esport game instead of just a world-known game. But I mean, in terms of that, guys, I've not really got any questions I have really seen pointed out that I would be bringing up. And I suppose that's maybe a good thing since we're now reaching the 2-hour mark. But let's face it, when us guys are involved, you spend a long time looking for something that's good quality as us. Good things come to those who stick with us and wait. But I mean, that's pretty much it from me, guys, unless you've got anything you want to bring in to the end of our episode today.
I just won't sleep. It's been a long day, man.
That's fair enough.
I'm pretty tired as well.
Yeah. But in terms of that, guys, I mean, as I said, keep the questions coming on things like Twitter, of course. You can reach all of ourselves on the social media links, which are on the screen, as you've been seeing throughout the stream today, of course. You can all hit us, guys up, ask us questions. If you get any suggestions about the future episodes of what you would like to, see us discuss and things like that, we're always looking for more kind of points we can talk about. And while, of course, I'm talking about the episodes in general, of course, the episodes made possible by the man behind the scenes, Erwin Weber of ESAC. Still looking, of course, for front-end developers to be part of the ongoing platform project, which is esac.gg. So I definitely encourage you guys to hit them up on the ESAC Twitter page, or myself directly, as I'm of course involved in the project as well, so you can kind of be a positive part ongoing for this new project, of course. But that's been it from me, guys. I'm sure my fellow co-hosts, if we'll say, the dynamic duo which carries me through the fucking podcast at the very least will be happy to sign off, go to sleep, get the pee break finally as we signed off from last time. But it's been a pleasure, guys, bringing 2 hours of Let's Talk Trackmania for you. We'll be here next week once again, same time, same place. You can catch us all in the streams. But thank you very much for those who stuck with us for so long, giving us the questions and giving us a platform to talk. But that's been it from me, guys. We'll see you next time and enjoy the rest of your day.